The private lounge held its breath. Riccardo Ferrante, arrogant heir to New York's most feared Italian Mafia family, had just mocked the Russian waitress for her accent. Called her cute, like she was a trained pet. He thought she was powerless. He thought she was nobody. He was catastrophically wrong. Instead of lowering her eyes, Victoria looked directly at Don Antonio and spoke. Not in Russian, not in Italian, but in Old Church Slavonic, the forbidden ceremonial code of the Bratva elite. Words that hadn't been uttered in the underworld since the Cold War. The ancient language of blood oaths and execution orders. The room went ice cold. Don Antonio's hand froze halfway to his cigar, his face draining of color. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of the man he'd ordered killed. And the code she just spoke. It was the exact phrase used to authorize her father's execution 8 years ago. She just told him she knew. She'd just declared war. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments so we will bring more exciting stories to you. The Sky Elite Private Terminal, tucked discreetly behind JFK's main concourses, smelled of champagne on ice, imported caviar, and the suffocating silence of people who could afford to kill you. 20 minutes until boarding. 20 minutes of flawless, invisible service for clients whose names never appeared on passenger manifests. Move, move, move. Marcus, the terminal manager, ordered, a man teetering on the edge of a nervous breakdown. He dabbed his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, his eyes darting between the Patek Philippe on his wrist and the frosted glass doors. If those champagne flutes aren't chilled to exactly 42 degrees, I will personally ensure you never work in aviation again. Do you understand me? Victoria adjusted her uniform, keeping her head down. She hated nights like this. At 26, she had perfected the art of being invisible. She kept her platinum blonde hair dyed dark brown now, brown contact lenses hiding ice blue eyes. Her natural Russian accent softened through 8 years of careful practice. She wore the standard black and white waitress uniform like armor. Crisp, professional, utterly forgettable. Volkova. Marcus snapped, his fingers inches from her face. She didn't cower. She'd trained herself out of that reaction years ago. Yes, Mr. Kensington. You will be in the Ferrante party, new Gulfstream G650 lunch. Premium service. Champagne, caviar, and silence. You do not speak unless spoken to. You do not make eye contact. You do not exist in their world. Are we clear? The Ferrante party. Victoria's hands didn't shake as she adjusted the crystal glasses on her tray. She'd trained herself out of that reaction too. But inside, the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her memories began to crack. 8 years. 8 years since she'd heard that name spoken aloud. 8 years since the night that turned Moscow snow-red with her father's blood. Miss Volkova, did you hear me? Crystal clear, sir. Her voice was steady, accentless, perfectly American. I understand completely. But understanding and surviving were two very different things. Good. They'll be here in 3 minutes. The Don doesn't tolerate mistakes. His son. Marcus's voice dropped to a nervous whisper. Riccardo is worse. Entitled. Cruel. He enjoys making staff uncomfortable. Do not give him ammunition. Victoria nodded, her face a mask of professional composure. She moved toward the private jet lounge, her footsteps silent on the marble floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the Gulfstream G650 waiting on the tarmac. $70 million of Italian Mafia power. Ready to take the Ferrante family to wherever men like them went when they needed to discuss things that couldn't be discussed on American soil. She arranged the champagne bucket with mechanical precision. Beluga caviar on ice. Hand-cut crystal. Linen napkins folded into perfect triangles. Every detail flawless, every movement controlled. Because control was all she had left. Her father, Dmitry Volkov, had taught her that control was the difference between a predator and prey. He'd been the pack-on of the most powerful Russian Bratva in New York, until the Ferrantes decided his shipping routes were worth more than his life. The massacre had been efficient, professional, thorough, or so they'd thought. Victoria had been at St. Petersburg State University, defending her thesis on Cold War cryptography, when the call came. By the time she flew back to New York, Her father was already in the ground. Her two brothers, Alexei and Nikolai, buried beside him. Her mother, Svetlana, who'd survived the siege of Leningrad as a child only to die in a Brighton Beach safe house, laid to rest in the Russian Orthodox cemetery in Queens. The authorities called it gang violence. The Russian community whispered the truth. And Victoria Volkova, daughter, sister, heir to nothing, learned to disappear. She cut her hair, dyed it dark, bought brown contacts to hide the Volkov ice blue eyes that every Bratva soldier in the city would recognize. She moved from Brighton Beach to a studio in Astoria, far from the Russian enclaves where her face was a ghost story. She took English names, American jobs, learned to soften the hard consonants of her native tongue until she sounded like any other immigrant trying to make it in New York. For 8 years, she'd been a ghost. For 8 years, she'd been safe. But safety was about to shatter. The frosted glass doors swung open with a whisper of hydraulics. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. They entered like a conquering army. For bodyguards first, mountains of muscle poured into Tom Ford's suits, earpieces visible, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. Their eyes swept the lounge with professional efficiency, cataloging exits, identifying threats, dismissing Victoria as irrelevant. Then came the sun. Ricardo Ferrante was everything Victoria had heard whispered in the back rooms of Brighton Beach bars, where old Russians drank vodka and remembered better days. Tall, perhaps 6'3", with the kind of build that came from private trainers and pharmaceutical assistants. His suit was midnight blue, perfectly tailored to show off shoulders that had never done honest work. His dark hair was styled with the casual precision of someone who spent more on grooming than most people earned in a month. His face was handsome in that sharp, cruel way. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips that curled into a perpetual smirk of entitled amusement. He looked at Victoria the way you might look at furniture. Useful, forgettable, beneath notice. And finally, Don Antonio Ferrante. He was older than Victoria expected, mid-70s at least, moving with the careful dignity of a man whose body had begun betraying him, but whose authority remained absolute. He wore a 3-piece charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent, a fedora that belonged to another era, and carried an ebony cane topped with a silver lion's head. But it was his eyes that made Victoria's blood run cold. They were the eyes of a man who'd ordered deaths the way other people ordered coffee. Calm, calculating, completely devoid of doubt. Don Antonio settled into the throne-like chair positioned in the center of the lounge. Gold and red upholstery, deliberately elevated, forcing everyone else to look up at him. He pulled out a vintage white-leaf Chillum pipe, packed it with deliberate slowness, and lit it with a silver lighter that caught the light like a warning. Ricardo remained standing, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing as he spoke rapid Italian to his father. Something about Chicago. Something about shipping routes. Something that made Antonio's expression darken with displeasure. Victoria moved like a shadow, presenting the champagne for inspection. Dom Perignon, 2008, she said quietly, her accent carefully neutral. Chilled to 42 degrees as requested. Ricardo's head snapped toward her. His eyes, dark, arrogant, assessing, raked over her with casual contempt. Well, well, he said, switching to English, his voice dripping with amusement. What do we have here? Marcus, you hired a Russian. Sir, Miss Volkova is one of our most experienced. I didn't ask for her resume. Ricardo stepped closer, invading Victoria's space with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. I asked if she's Russian. Victoria kept her eyes lowered, her hands steady on the bottle. Yes, sir. Originally, Ricardo repeated, his tone mocking. He turned to his father with a grin. Papa, listen to this. Say something else, sweetheart. Let's hear that cute little accent. Victoria's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but her voice remained calm. Would you prefer still or sparkling water with your champagne, sir? Ricardo laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. C. Still LL or sparkling G. It's adorable, like a trained bear trying to speak English. He leaned against the bar, warming to his performance. Tell me, Dorothea, did you learn English from Hollywood movies? You sound like every Bond villain's secretary. One of the bodyguards snickered. Don Antonio said nothing, simply drew on his pipe and watched his son perform. Victoria poured the champagne with hands that didn't shake. "Will there be anything else, sir?" "Oh, she's polite too. Marcus, you've got yourself a real gem here." Very obedient. Ricardo accepted the champagne flute, then made a show of examining it. "Although I have to wonder, what's a Russian doing working in an Italian-owned terminal? Shouldn't you be serving borscht in Brighton Beach?" The temperature in Victoria's chest dropped to 0. She felt the old rage stirring, the fury she'd buried beneath 8 years of carefully constructed invisibility. "I work where I'm hired, sir," she said evenly. "Where I am hired," Ricardo mimicked, exaggerating her nearly non-existent accent. "Papa, remember when the Russians tried to move in on our shipping routes? Remember how that turned out?" He took a sip of champagne, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. "They learned their place pretty quickly, didn't they?" Don Antonio finally spoke, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. "Ricardo, enough." But Ricardo was on a roll, showing off for his father, for his men, for anyone who might be impressed by his casual cruelty. "I'm just saying, the Russians, they're good at certain things. Vodka, intimidation, but finesse." He gestured around the luxury lounge. "That's Italian. We built this city. The Russians, they're just tenants." Something inside Victoria snapped. Not visibly, not physically, but the iron control she'd maintained for 8 years. The carefully constructed persona of Anya Morozova, the invisible waitress, cracked like ice under pressure. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Vikachka, we are not tenants in any man's city. We are wolves, and wolves bow to no one." Victoria set down the champagne bottle with deliberate precision. She straightened her spine. She lifted her chin. And she looked Ricardo Ferrante directly in the eye, something no service worker would ever dare. And then she spoke, not in English, not in Russian, in Old Church Slavonic, the sacred ceremonial language of the ancient Rus, the tongue of blood oaths and execution orders, words that hadn't been spoken in underworld circles since the Cold War. Zymoi lesvium, Valkia linea concitsia. By winter's blade, the wolf's line ends. The effect was instantaneous. Don Antonio's hand froze halfway to his mouth, the pipe suspended in midair. His face drained of color, aging him 20 years in 2 seconds. The bodyguards' hands moved toward their weapons, then stopped, confused by their Don's paralysis. Ricardo's smirk vanished, replaced by something between confusion and dawning horror as he watched his father's reaction. Victoria stood there, trembling with suppressed rage and terror and 8 years of buried grief, realizing she'd just destroyed everything. Because those words, that exact phrase, had been the authorization code sent to the 5 families 8 years ago. The code that greenlighted the Volkov massacre. The code that only someone with access to the highest levels of Bratva protocol would know. The code that told Don Antonio Ferrante exactly who she was. His hand finally completed its journey to his mouth. He drew on the pipe, exhaled smoke that hung in the air like a ghost. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Valkia linea, wolf's line. You are." He stopped, his eyes boring into hers with the intensity of a man seeing a ghost. Ricardo looked between them, lost. "Papa, what did she say? What does it mean?" But Don Antonio didn't answer his son. He was too busy staring at the waitress who'd just spoken the language of the dead. And Victoria Volkova, no longer Anya, no longer invisible, no longer safe, stared back at the man who'd ordered her family's execution. The private lounge held its breath. And 8 years of carefully constructed lies shattered like the champagne flute that slipped from Ricardo's nerveless fingers and exploded against the marble floor. The ghost in first class. The shattered champagne flute seemed to ring in the silence forever, crystal fragments scattering across marble like scattered stars. Nobody moved to clean it. Nobody dared. Victoria's pulse hammered in her throat, but her face remained perfectly still. 8 years of survival instinct screamed at her to run, to drop the tray and bolt for the service exit, to disappear into the New York night the way she'd disappeared into a new identity. But her father's voice was louder. "A Volkov never runs. We face death standing." Don Antonio rose slowly from his throne-like chair, the movement deliberate, measured. The pipe remained clenched between his teeth, smoke curling around his face like a veil. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades. Everyone out. The bodyguards hesitated for a fraction of a second, trained to never leave their principal unprotected. Antonio's gaze flickered toward them, and they moved immediately, filing out through the frosted doors without a word. Even Marcus scrambled to follow, his face pale with the terrible understanding that he'd just witnessed something that could get him killed. Ricardo remained frozen, his expensive shoes surrounded by shattered crystal and pooling champagne. "Papa, what?" "Ricardo." Antonio didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Wait outside." But she just... outside. For a moment, something flickered across Ricardo's face. Wounded pride, confusion, the petulant anger of a son dismissed in front of a servant. But he went, casting one last look at Victoria that was no longer mocking. It was calculating. Dangerous. The door whispered shut. Victoria was alone with the man who'd ordered her family's execution. Antonio moved closer, his cane tapping against the marble with rhythmic precision. He circled her slowly, examining her the way a jeweler examines a stone for flaws. She forced herself to remain still, to meet his gaze when it found hers. "Zymoi lesvium, Valkia linea conchitia," he repeated softly, the old church Slavonic rolling off his tongue with surprising fluency. "I haven't heard those words spoken aloud in 8 years. Not since I authorized the removal of a problem that threatened to upset the balance of power in this city." He stopped directly in front of her. "Dmitry Volkov was that problem. He was my father." The words came out steady cold. No accent now. No carefully practiced American inflection. Just the hard consonants of Moscow winters and Bratva blood. "Yes, I can see it now." Antonio studied her face with the intensity of a man who'd made a career of reading people. "The eyes. Even with the brown contacts, I can see them. Volkov ice. Your father had those eyes. Unnerving. Like looking into a frozen lake and knowing something dangerous lives beneath. You killed him because he threatened your shipping routes. I killed him because he was building an army." Antonio's tone was matter-of-fact, neither defensive nor apologetic. The Bratva were positioning themselves to challenge the 5 families. "Your father was brilliant, ambitious, and dangerously effective. If I'd waited another 6 months, it would have been war. Instead, I made it efficient. You made it a massacre. My brothers were 16 and 19. My mother was a civilian. They weren't soldiers." No. For the first time, something that might have been regret crossed Antonio's face. They weren't. But in our world, proximity to power is its own sentence. He paused, drawing on his pipe. "You were at university. St. Petersburg, if the intelligence was correct. Why did you come back? To bury what was left of my family. And then I became nobody. Anya Morozova, waitress, invisible, harmless. I dyed my hair, wore contacts, learned to speak like an American. I erased Victoria Volkova. Until tonight." Antonio's eyes narrowed. "Why break cover now? My son is an arrogant fool, yes, but his mockery wasn't worth revealing yourself. You're too smart for that. So tell me, Dorogeya, what game are you playing?" Victoria's hands clenched at her sides. "He called my people tenants. He laughed about what happened to my father like it was a joke told over champagne. And that made you so angry you threw away 8 years of careful hiding." Antonio shook his head slowly. "No. Pride doesn't make strategic mistakes. Fear does. Rage does. But calculated survival? That keeps its mouth shut." He leaned closer. "Unless you wanted me to know. Unless this was always the plan." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "I'm not here to kill you," Victoria said quietly. "Then why are you here at all?" Before she could answer, alarms shattered the silence. Harsh, electronic, urgent. Antonio's bodyguards burst back through the doors, weapons drawn, faces grim. "Don Antonio, we have a situation," the lead guard barked. Unidentified individuals on the tarmac. Armed. Moving toward the aircraft. Antonio's expression didn't change, but his grip on the cane tightened. "How many?" "At least 6. Professional positioning. It's a hit team," Victoria finished, her training kicking in before her brain could stop her tongue. Every eye in the room snapped to her. The cleaning crew that came through 20 minutes ago. They weren't on the manifest. Wrong uniforms, wrong equipment. I noticed, but I thought. She'd thought they were here for her. Not for him. Antonio's eyes locked onto hers with terrible intensity. You saw them? Yes. And you said nothing. The implication was clear. She'd let the assassins through. She'd wanted him dead. Except, sir, another guard burst in. Shots fired. Gate 3. They're coming through the main terminal. We need to move. Now. Antonio didn't move. He was still staring at Victoria, weighing her life in the balance of a decision that would take seconds to make. Papa. Ricardo appeared in the doorway, his weapon drawn, his earlier cruel amusement replaced by cold efficiency. We have to go. The car's waiting at the service entrance. The sound of gunfire echoed through the terminal. Distant but getting closer. Screaming. The chaos of civilians realizing luxury and money couldn't stop bullets. Antonio made his decision. Take her, he commanded. 2 bodyguards moved toward Victoria. She stepped back instinctively, her hands rising. Not in surrender, but in the defensive posture of someone who knew how to fight. Wait. You wanted my attention, Antonio said coldly. You have it. Now you're coming with us. And we're going to have a very long conversation about who sent you and why you're really here. Nobody sent me. I'm just. Ricardo's hand clamped around her arm like an iron band. Up close, he smelled of expensive cologne and controlled violence. His earlier mockery was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. You're just a waitress who speaks the language of assassination orders? His breath was hot against her ear. Right. Move. Now. The gunfire was closer now. Shouting in Russian, not Italian. Victoria's blood ran cold. They weren't here for Antonio. They were here for her. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments, so we will bring more exciting stories to you. The service corridor was narrow, utilitarian. A sharp contrast to the luxury lounge they'd just abandoned. Ricardo hauled Victoria through it with bruising force, Antonio's bodyguards forming a protective diamond around the Don. Behind them, the gunfire intensified, punctuated by the distinct crack of a Kalashnikov. Bratva weapons, one of the guards muttered. This is a Russian op. Victoria's mind raced. 8 years of hiding, and someone had found her the same night she'd exposed herself to the Ferrantes. That wasn't coincidence. That was coordination. The service exit, Antonio commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. Bring the cars around. Double perimeter. They burst through a fire door into the cold March night. 3 black SUVs idled in the restricted zone, engines running, doors already open. Ricardo shoved Victoria toward the middle vehicle. In. Now. She resisted, planting her feet. Listen to me. Those men aren't here for you. There. Shut up. Ricardo's weapon was suddenly pressed against her spine. You're either the bait or the target, and either way, you're leverage. Move. Ricardo. Antonio's voice cut through the tension. We need her conscious and able to talk. Put the gun away. Papa she could be. I know what she is. Antonio's eyes found Victoria's in the dim light. Dmitry Volkov's daughter, which means someone very much wants her dead, or they want us dead for harboring her. Either scenario requires answers. He gestured toward the vehicle. Get in, Miss Volkova. You have one chance to explain why Russian assassins just attacked a terminal where you happen to work, 30 seconds after you revealed yourself to me. Victoria's options collapsed to a single point. Run and die in the parking lot, or get in the car and buy time. She climbed in. Antonio slid in beside her, Ricardo on her other side, boxing her in. The door slammed. The convoy moved immediately, tires squealing on asphalt. Through the tinted windows, Victoria saw muzzle flashes at the terminal entrance. Security guards down, civilians running, and 6 men in tactical gear moving with military precision toward where the Ferrantes had been 60 seconds ago. They're too late, Ricardo observed coldly. Professional timing, but they missed the window. Someone's intelligence was off. Or, Antonio said quietly, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. They knew exactly where we'd be, and our little waitress was supposed to keep us in place long enough for them to arrive. He leaned forward. So tell me, Valkia Doc, Wolf's daughter, Did you speak that code to stall us? To mark us for your Bratva friends? No. Victoria's voice was steel. I spoke it because your son needed to understand that Russians aren't pets or jokes. We're the wolves who remember every insult. She turned to Ricardo, her brown contacts unable to hide the fury beneath. You mocked my father's language. You laughed about his death. You called us tenants. Her voice dropped to something dangerous. I wanted you to know exactly who serves your champagne. I wanted to see your faces when you realized. Realized what? Ricardo demanded. That the ghost you tried to bury is still alive. And she knows every word spoken the night you killed her family. The SUV's interior went silent except for the engine's purr and the distant wail of sirens converging on the terminal. Antonio's expression was unreadable. The authorization code. How did you know it? My father recorded everything. Insurance, he called it. Every conversation with the 5 families. Every threat, every negotiation, every code word. Victoria met his gaze without cowering, including the phrase that sentenced my family to death. I've listened to that recording 1,000 times. Your voice giving the approval. The exact words in Old Church Slavonic, so there could be no misunderstanding across languages. Her smile was bitter. I know that code better than any prayer. Ricardo's face had gone pale. Papa, if she has recordings. She would have used them by now, Antonio interrupted. Blackmail requires leverage, and she's been invisible for 8 years. No, this is something else. He studied Victoria with the intensity of a man solving a lethal puzzle. You came back to New York. You stayed close to our world, working where we do business. You kept the evidence but never used it. Why? Because my father taught me that revenge without honor is just murder, Victoria said. I was waiting for the right moment, the right method. And tonight was it? Tonight was a mistake. The admission cost her, but honesty was the only card she had left. Your son's cruelty made me forget 8 years of discipline. I wanted to hurt him the way he hurt me. I wanted to see fear in his eyes. She looked at Ricardo. And I did. Ricardo's jaw clenched. The mockery was completely gone now, replaced by something harder. You got your wish. Now you're going to regret it. The convoy took surface streets, avoiding highways where they'd be exposed. Victoria watched the city blur past, Brighton Beach, her old neighborhood, just miles away. The place where every Russian in New York knew the Volkov name, where she could never return. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere secure, Antonio replied. Somewhere we can have an uninterrupted conversation. The estate, Ricardo clarified, his tone making it clear this wasn't a social invitation. High walls. No witnesses. Very private. The threat was obvious. Victoria had walked into the lion's den, and the doors were closing behind her. The men at the terminal, she said carefully. They weren't Bratva. That got Antonio's attention. You said they had Russian weapons. Kalashnikovs, yes. But their movements were wrong. Too rigid. Military, not street. Victoria had spent her childhood around Bratva soldiers. She knew how they moved, how they thought. Real Bratva would have come through the service entrances, not the main terminal. They would have used suppressed weapons, not assault rifles that draw every cop in the city. This was meant to be loud, messy, public. A message, Antonio murmured. Or a frame, Ricardo added, his eyes sharp. Make it look like the Russians are moving on Ferrante territory. Start a war between our families. But who benefits from that? Antonio's fingers drummed against his cane. The other families would move in while we're distracted. Chicago, maybe. Or the Romanos. They've been hungry for our shipping contracts. Victoria's mind worked through the angles. Someone had known the Ferrantes would be at the terminal tonight. Someone had known she'd be serving them. Someone had orchestrated a scenario where both Antonio and the last Volkov would be in the same place, at the same time. This was a setup, she said slowly. For both of us. Convenient theory, Ricardo shot back. Especially since you're the one who conveniently revealed yourself 30 seconds before the shooting started. If I wanted you dead, there are quieter ways. Like poison in champagne? Like a bullet from a rooftop 6 blocks away. Victoria met his gaze directly. I'm Dmitry Volkov's daughter. I was trained to kill before I learned to drive. If I wanted your father dead, he would be. The SUV went silent. Antonio's expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or a recalculation of threat assessment. "She's telling the truth," he said finally. "About the training, at least. I knew Dmitri. He wouldn't have left his only surviving child defenseless." He turned to Victoria. "So if you're not here to kill me, and you're not working with the men who attacked us, then what do you want?" "I want to know who ordered my family killed." "I did," Antonio said flatly. "No." Victoria shook her head. "You gave the authorization. But someone gave you the intelligence that made you pull the trigger. Someone told you my father was building an army, threatening the 5 families. Someone convinced you that a massacre was the only option." She leaned forward. "Who was it, Don Antonio? Who whispered in your ear 8 years ago and made you believe Dmitri Volkov had to die?" Antonio's face remained impassive, but his silence was answer enough. He didn't remember. Or worse, he didn't know. The SUV slowed, turning through iron gates that loomed 12 feet high. Guard towers. Floodlights. The Ferrante estate rose before them like a fortress designed to keep the world out. Or to keep prisoners in. "End of the line," Ricardo said, his hand returning to Victoria's arm. "Time for answers. And if you lie to us again," his grip tightened, "you'll learn why my father calls me his enforcer." The estate's interior was old-world opulence. Marble floors, oil paintings of dead patriarchs, furniture that cost more than most people's homes. But Victoria barely registered the luxury. Her tactical mind was cataloging exits, counting guards, measuring distances. 8 men visible. Probably twice that hidden. Windows reinforced. Doors solid core with electronic locks. Getting out would require either cooperation or violence. "This way." Ricardo guided her, more gently now but no less firmly, through corridors lined with family history. Photos of Antonio with mayors, governors, men whose public faces hid private allegiances. They entered a study that smelled of leather and cigar smoke. Antonio settled behind a massive desk, gesturing for Victoria to sit in the chair across from him. The positioning was deliberate, supplicant before king. She remained standing. "Stubborn," Antonio observed. "Like your father. He never sat in that chair either." He pulled out a crystal decanter, poured 3 fingers of amber liquid. "Dmitri and I had an understanding once. Before the shipping routes became an issue. Before someone convinced me he was a threat." "Who?" Victoria demanded. "Who gave you the intelligence?" "My consigliera, Franco Torino." Antonio sipped his drink. "He brought me intercepted communications. Phone calls between Dmitri and Chicago. Plans to move against the 5 families. Evidence that seemed irrefutable. And you never questioned it? Why would I? Franco had been with me for 20 years. Loyal. Meticulous." Antonio's eyes darkened. "Are you suggesting he lied?" "I'm suggesting," Victoria said carefully, "that someone benefited from both our families being weakened. The Volkovs eliminated. The Ferrantes distracted by securing the territory you took from us. Who moved into the vacuum." Before Antonio could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted. Surprise, then concern, then cold fury. "Ricardo, we have a problem." Ricardo moved to his father's side, reading the message over his shoulder. His face went white. "What?" Victoria asked. Antonio looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine shock in his eyes. The terminal attack. Security footage just came through. He turned the phone toward her. The image showed the moment before the shooting, Victoria in her waitress uniform, serving champagne. But in the corner of the frame, barely visible, was a man in a maintenance uniform. A man with his phone out, filming her speaking the old church Slavonic code. "Someone wanted proof you were alive," Antonio said slowly. "And they got it. The moment you revealed yourself to me, you revealed yourself to everyone." He set down the phone. "Victoria Volkova is no longer dead, which means every Russian family that wants to claim your father's legacy, every Italian family that sees you as a loose end, they all know exactly where you are." "How?" But even as she asked, Victoria knew. The terminal has surveillance, security feeds, and judging by this footage making it to my phone within an hour. Ricardo's voice was grim. "Someone inside our security apparatus is sending it out. To everyone. Victoria felt the walls closing in. She'd spent 8 years invisible, and in one moment of pride, she'd painted a target on her back visible from every corner of the underworld. "So what now?" she asked quietly. Antonio stood, walking to the window overlooking his fortress estate. Now you're the most dangerous woman in New York. And the question becomes, do I hand you over to the wolves circling my gates, or do I use you as the weapon you were trained to be?" He turned to face her. "Because make no mistake, Miss Volkova, you just started a war, and everyone will be coming." The estate's security room was a maze of monitors showing every angle of the property. Ricardo stood beside his father, watching feeds from the terminal attack play on loop. Victoria remained under guard in the corner, acutely aware that one word from Antonio could end her life. "Freeze that frame," Antonio commanded. The tech operator paused the footage on the moment Victoria had spotted the fake cleaning crew. Her body language was unmistakable, weight shifting to the balls of her feet, eyes tracking multiple threats, hands positioning near improvised weapons. "She knew," Ricardo said quietly. 20 seconds before the shooting started, she knew. "And she said nothing," Antonio added. "She let armed men position themselves around us. Until she didn't." Ricardo pulled up another angle. Victoria's sprint across the lounge. Her tackle that had taken Antonio behind the pillar a fraction of a second before bullets shredded the space where he'd been standing. "She saved your life, Papa." "Why?" "An excellent question." Antonio turned to face Victoria. "You had the perfect opportunity. Let me die, blame it on the attackers, walk away clean. Instead, you exposed yourself as someone with tactical training and saved the man who killed your family." "Why?" Victoria met his gaze steadily. "I told you, revenge without honor is murder. If you die to a sniper's bullet, I gain nothing. No acknowledgement. No justice. Just another body in a war that never ends. So you want me alive? I want you to understand what you took from me. I want you to look me in the eye and admit it. And then," she stopped, choosing her words carefully, "then I want you to help me find who manipulated you into pulling the trigger." "Franco," Ricardo interjected. "Your consigliera. If he fed you false intelligence about the Volkovs, then he's been playing both sides for 8 years. Antonio's expression darkened. "Using my authority to eliminate rivals while appearing loyal. But why would Franco want Dmitri dead?" "The shipping routes," Victoria said. "My father controlled the Atlantic corridor. Legitimate cargo, yes, but also the infrastructure to move other goods. Pharmaceuticals from Eastern Europe, art from Moscow, currency from offshore accounts." She stepped forward despite the guards tensing. "When you killed him, someone had to fill that vacuum. Who took over those routes?" "Don Antonio." Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments so we will bring more exciting stories to you. The silence was answer enough. "Franco," Antonio whispered, the pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. "He volunteered to secure the Volkov operations after the hit. Said it was necessary to prevent the territory from fragmenting. I let him because I trusted him. And he's been siphoning profits ever since," Ricardo finished. "Using your name, your authority, while building his own empire underneath yours." Antonio's hand clenched on his cane hard enough to whiten his knuckles. 30 years. 30 years of loyalty, and it was all theater. "Not all of it," Victoria said quietly. "The attack tonight, Franco wasn't trying to kill you. He was trying to kill me before I could tell you the truth. The terminal assault, the footage being leaked, he's cleaning house. Eliminating the one person who could connect him to the Volkov massacre. Then why leak your identity to every family in the city?" Ricardo demanded. "Because he knows I'll come for him. And when I do, half the underworld will be coming for me." Victoria's smile was bitter. "He's using me as bait. Draw out anyone still loyal to the Volkov name. Let the families tear each other apart, fighting over my father's legacy. Meanwhile, Franco consolidates power in the chaos." Antonio stood slowly, age and rage warring in his posture. "Where is he now?" "Here, Papa." Ricardo pulled up security logs. "Franco arrived 15 minutes ago. Said he had urgent intelligence about the terminal attack. He's waiting in the guest house." "Convenient." Antonio's voice had gone cold, deadly. He wants to see how we handle the Volkov girl. Gauge whether his manipulation is still working. Then let's not disappoint him, Victoria said. Let me talk to Franco. Let him think I'm your prisoner, that you're deciding what to do with me. He'll show his hand. Or he'll kill you the moment you're alone with him, Ricardo countered. Let him try. Victoria's eyes were ice. I've been waiting 8 years to look my family's real murderer in the face. Your father pulled the trigger, but Franco loaded the gun. Antonio studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Ricardo, bring Franco to the interrogation room. Tell him we've captured the Volkov daughter and need his counsel on how to proceed. He looked at Victoria. You'll wear a wire. My men will be watching. But if Franco confirms what you've said, then I want him, Victoria interrupted. Not Italian justice. Not a bullet in the back. I want him to know exactly who killed him and why. The Volkov way. The Volkov way, Antonio repeated, something like respect entering his tone. Your father would say the same thing. He extended his hand. Then we have an accord, Miss Volkova. Help me expose the traitor in my house, and I'll give you the justice your family deserves. Victoria looked at the offered hand. The hand that had signed her family's death warrant. The hand that might now give her the vengeance she'd dreamed of for 8 years. She shook it. One condition, she said. When this is done, the Ferrantes acknowledge the blood debt. Publicly. I want every family in New York to know that Antonio Ferrante admits he was manipulated into killing the Volkovs. That will make me look weak. That will make you look honest. There's a difference. Antonio's grip tightened. You're more like Dmitri than you know. He drove just as hard a bargain. He released her hand. You have my word. Expose Franco, and I'll restore your family's honor. Then let's go meet the man who destroyed both our families, Victoria said, and make him pay for it. The interrogation room was deliberately intimidating. Concrete walls, a single metal table, harsh overhead lighting that left no shadows to hide in. Victoria sat in the chair usually reserved for men about to confess sins they'd die for. She wore her waitress uniform still, blood staining the shoulder where a bullet had grazed her during the terminal chaos. The wire was taped between her shoulder blades, microphone hidden in her bra. Ricardo's tech team was listening from the next room. Antonio himself was watching through one-way glass. The door opened. Franco Torino entered with the confidence of a man who'd walked through this door 1,000 times on the other side of the interrogation. He was mid-60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that screamed old money and older loyalties. His face was pleasant, grandfatherly, the kind of face that made people trust him. Victoria hated him instantly. So, Franco said, settling into the chair across from her with casual ease. The ghost of Dmitri Volkov. I must admit, I never expected to see you again. We were so thorough. The admission was instant. Careless. He thought she was already dead. He just didn't know it yet. You were there, Victoria said quietly. The night my family died. You were there. I planned it. Franco's smile was cold. Antonio gave the order, yes. But I orchestrated every detail. The timing, the approach, the elimination of escape routes. Your father was brilliant, but brilliance dies just as easily as stupidity when you know where to aim. Why? The question tore out of her. My father never threatened the 5 families. That was a lie. Why did you want him dead? Because Dmitri Volkov was building something beautiful, Franco said, leaning forward. A smuggling network that spanned 3 continents. Pharmaceutical routes from Afghanistan through Moscow to New York. Art theft pipelines from European museums to private collectors. Currency exchanges that could move billions without touching a single regulated bank. His eyes gleamed. And he was doing it all without sharing the profits. Without asking permission from the Italians who'd built this city. So you took it. I took what was mine by right of conquest. Franco spread his hands. Antonio believed my intelligence reports. He signed the execution order. And when the Volkovs were eliminated, I volunteered to secure their operations. For the family, of course. For stability. His laugh was dry. Antonio never even audited the books. 30 years of trust bought me an empire hidden inside his empire. Behind the glass, Antonio's face was carved from stone. But his hand gripped the cane hard enough to crack it. And tonight? Victoria asked. The terminal attack? You were supposed to be dead. Finding out you'd survived, working under our noses for 8 years, that was unacceptable. Franco pulled out a phone, showing her the leaked footage of her speaking Old Church Slavonic. So I arranged a cleanup. The terminal assault was loud, messy, designed to draw attention while my real team positioned to eliminate you quietly in the chaos. Unfortunately, you proved as resourceful as your father. He pocketed the phone. But you made a mistake coming here. Antonio may hesitate to kill you, but I won't. You think he'll let you? I think Antonio values loyalty over truth. I've been his right hand for 3 decades. You're a ghost who appeared one night with a convenient story about frame-ups and manipulation. Franco's smile widened. Who do you think he'll believe? The door opened. Antonio entered, Ricardo at his shoulder. Both men were armed. Franco's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw his hand shift subtly toward his jacket, toward a weapon he wouldn't live long enough to draw. Everything, Antonio said, his voice like gravel over broken glass. We heard everything, Franco. 30 years, and you were stealing from me. Using my authority to build your own empire. Making me a fool. Franco stood slowly. Antonio, I can explain. Explain how you murdered an innocent family to steal their operations? Explain how you tried to kill this woman tonight. Explain how you just confessed to 3 decades of betrayal. Antonio's weapon cleared his holster with practiced ease. There's no explanation that saves you, old friend. Wait, Victoria said. Both men looked at her. He's mine. You can't be serious, Franco scoffed. Antonio, you're going to let a Russian child dictate. She's Dmitry Volkov's daughter, Antonio interrupted coldly. And you used my name to spill Volkov blood. That debt transfers to me. So yes, Franco. She gets to decide how you die. Victoria stood, reached into her uniform, and pulled out the silver Orthodox cross she'd hidden for 8 years. The Volkov family crest gleamed in the harsh light. You took everything from me, she said quietly, stepping toward Franco. My father, my brothers, my mother, my name, my life. She was close now, close enough to see fear finally entering his eyes. You did it for money, for power, for routes and percentages and profit margins. Please, Franco whispered. I can give you anything. Money, connections, You can die knowing you failed. Victoria's voice was ice. The Volkov line didn't end. The empire you stole? I'm taking it back. And every family in this city will know that Franco Torino died because he underestimated a woman he thought he'd buried. She looked at Antonio. I need a phone and access to your encrypted network. Antonio handed her his phone without hesitation. Victoria pulled up contacts, scrolled to a name that made Ricardo suck in a breath, the head of the Bratva Council in Brighton Beach, and pressed call. When the voice answered in Russian, she responded in the same language, her accent pure Moscow aristocracy. This is Victoria Volkova, daughter of Dmitry, Pakhan of the Atlantic Bratva. I'm alive. I'm at the Ferrante estate, and I'm calling in every debt my father was owed. She switched to English, looking directly at Franco. The wolves are coming, and you're going to tell them exactly what you did. Every detail, every name, every route you stole. Her smile was terrible. You wanted to expose me? Congratulations. You just exposed yourself to everyone who's been looking for my father's killer for 8 years. Franco's face had gone white. You can't. Antonio, you have to protect me. 30 years. 30 years of lies, Antonio said flatly. You're on your own, Franco. And God help you when the Russians arrive. He turned to Victoria. You have until dawn. After that, whatever's left of him is mine. I only need an hour, Victoria promised. She was Dmitry Volkov's daughter, and the wolves had finally come home. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments so we will bring more exciting stories to you. Dawn broke over the Ferrante estate, painting the fortress walls gold. In the study, Victoria sat across from Antonio, both of them exhausted from a night of revelations. Franco was in the basement, being questioned by men whose loyalty to Antonio had been forged over decades. His screams had stopped an hour ago. The recordings, Antonio said quietly. The ones your father made. Do they still exist? In a safety deposit box in Queens. buried under 3 fake names and 2 law firms. Victoria met his gaze. Every conversation he had with the 5 families for 5 years, including the one where Franco fed you false intelligence about my father planning to eliminate your leadership. I want to hear it. Why? Will it change what happened? No. Antonio's voice was heavy. But I need to hear the moment I was turned into a weapon. I need to know exactly how Franco played me. Victoria pulled out a small USB drive from her pocket. She'd been carrying it for 8 years, waiting for this moment. She plugged it into Antonio's computer. The audio was crystal clear, dated 8 years ago. Franco's voice. Don Antonio, we've intercepted communications. Dmitry Volkov is planning to move against the 5 families. He's been meeting with Chicago, negotiating their support. He wants to eliminate the Italian leadership and establish the Bratva as the primary power in New York. Antonio's voice. You're certain? Franco. I have phone records. Meeting locations. Witness testimony from our people inside the Bratva. Dmitry is planning a coordinated strike for next month. If we don't move first, we'll be fighting a war on multiple fronts. Silence. Then Antonio. Authorize the Volkov operation. Complete elimination. No survivors, no loose ends. Use the old Church Slavonic code for confirmation. I don't want any confusion across language barriers. Franco. Zymoi lesvium, Valkia linea conquitsia. Antonio. By Winter's blade, the wolf's line ends. Make it happen. The recording ended. Antonio sat in silence, his face carved from granite. He manipulated me perfectly, he finally said. Made it sound urgent. Made it sound like survival. And I never questioned it because Franco had never given me reason to doubt him. He murdered my family to steal their empire, Victoria said. And he used your authority to do it. That makes you complicit, Don Antonio. Whether you knew it or not. I know. Antonio looked at her with something that might have been respect. Which is why I'm offering you a choice. The Bratva Council arrives at noon. When they do, you can tell them I gave the order. Let them declare vendetta against the Ferrantes. Start a war that will burn through every family in this city. Or we stand together. You and I. Show them that Franco was the real enemy. That he played both our families against each other while he built his empire in the shadows. Antonio stood slowly. I can't give you back your family, but I can give you justice. And I can help you reclaim what your father built. Why would you do that? Because you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. Because you're operating with honor in a world that's forgotten what that means. And because, he paused, choosing his words carefully, because if Dmitry Volkov had a daughter like you, he would be proud. And I owe him that acknowledgement. Ricardo entered, his expression grim. Papa, Franco's talking. You need to hear this. They descended to the basement where Franco sat bound to a chair, his face battered but his eyes still calculating. When he saw Victoria, he actually smiled. You think you've won, he rasped. You think exposing me changes anything. But I built my network deep. Even if I die, my operations continue. The routes I stole from your father, they belong to me now. The money I've hidden, untouchable. You can kill me, but you can't touch what I've built. Where are the accounts? Antonio demanded. Encrypted. Biometric locks. Even if you torture me, you can't access them without the algorithm my people created. And they won't give it to you. They'll scatter the money to 100 shell corporations before you can blink. Victoria knelt in front of Franco, her voice soft. The algorithm. Biometric encryption. You used my father's system, didn't you? The one he designed to protect Bratva assets. Franco's smile faltered. How did you? Because Dmitry Volkov taught his daughter everything. Including the backdoor he built into that algorithm. The one only a Volkov heir could access. She stood. You didn't just steal his routes, Franco. You stole his security system. And you were too arrogant to realize he'd protected it against theft. She looked at Antonio. I need access to your secure server. And I need it now. The server room was a fortress within a fortress. Biometric locks, encrypted access, redundant security. Antonio's tech team had already set up the connection to Franco's financial network, using access codes they'd extracted from his phone. He's telling the truth, the lead technician said. The accounts are locked behind military-grade encryption. Without the algorithm, we're looking at decades to crack it. Give me the keyboard, Victoria said. She sat down, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The screen filled with code, strings of numbers and Cyrillic characters that made no sense to anyone watching, except Ricardo, who leaned over her shoulder. That's not just encryption. That's a mathematical prayer, Victoria finished. My father called it the Widowmaker, an algorithm based on Old Church Slavonic numerical mysticism combined with rotating biometric data. He designed it to be unbreakable by anyone who didn't understand both the language and the mathematics behind it. And you understand both? He made me memorize it when I was 12. Said it was insurance. That if anything happened to him, I could access everything he'd built and either continue it or burn it down. Her fingers never stopped moving. Franco stole the code but never understood its foundation. He thought it was just encryption. He didn't realize it was a prayer that only a Volkov could properly recite. The screen flashed red. Access denied. It's not working, Antonio said, tension creeping into his voice. Because I'm not just cracking the code. I'm announcing myself. Victoria typed faster. The algorithm requires biometric confirmation. Fingerprint, retinal scan, voice print. Franco had his people's data loaded. But the master override needs Volkov DNA. She pulled out a small blade from her pocket, something she'd carried for 8 years as a reminder. She pricked her finger, let a drop of blood fall onto the biometric scanner. DNA match required. The computer announced in Russian. State your name and lineage. Victoria leaned forward, speaking clearly in Old Church Slavonic. Victoria Dmitrievna Volkova, daughter of Dmitri, Pack-Han of the Atlantic Bratva, heir to the Wolf's legacy. By blood and bone, I claim what is mine. The screen flashed green. Access granted. The room erupted in activity as files began downloading. Account numbers, transaction records, names of politicians and judges and police officials on Franco's payroll. Shell corporations in the Caymans. Arms deals with Eastern European militaries. Pharmaceutical routes through Afghanistan. Art theft rings operating out of St. Petersburg. Franco had built an empire worth billions. And Victoria had just taken all of it. My God, Ricardo whispered. This isn't just smuggling operations. This is leverage over half the power structure in 3 countries. This is what my father built, Victoria said. What Franco stole. What I'm taking back. She turned to Antonio. Every file here proves Franco manipulated you. Every transaction shows him siphoning profits from Ferrante operations while you thought he was loyal. This is your evidence, Don Antonio. This is how you prove to the other families that you were deceived, not complicit. Antonio stared at the screen, decades of trust and betrayal laid bare in financial transactions and coded messages. Franco used me for 30 years, made me his weapon, made me kill an innocent family so he could steal their empire. And now we use his own evidence to destroy what he built, Victoria said. But I need something from you first. Name it. I want the Bratva routes returned to Volkov control. I want my family's name restored in the underworld. And I want public acknowledgement from the 5 families that Dmitry Volkov was not a traitor. He was murdered by a man who manipulated Italian honor to serve his own greed. You'll have it, Antonio promised. When the council meets at noon, I'll stand beside you and make it official. Then we have an accord. Victoria extended her hand. Antonio took it, his grip firm. Your father would be proud, Miss Volkova. You've reclaimed his empire without firing a shot. That's the kind of victory that legends are built on. I don't want legends, Victoria said quietly. I want my family's honor restored. And I want every person who whispers the Volkov name to remember that we don't break. We endure. The door burst open. One of Antonio's soldiers rushed in, his face pale. Don Antonio, the Bratva Council, they're here. Early. And they brought an army. Through the security monitors, they could see it. 20 vehicles, all bearing Russian plates, forming a perimeter around the Ferrante estate. Men in dark suits pouring out, armed to the teeth, their faces hard with purpose. At the center of the formation stood an older man, gray-bearded, wearing a long coat and carrying himself with absolute authority. Victoria recognized him instantly from her father's photographs. Maxim Petrov, she whispered. My father's oldest friend. The current Pakhan of the Brighton Beach Bratva. They're not here to negotiate, Ricardo said, his hand moving to his weapon. They're here for blood. Then we give them truth instead, Victoria said, standing. Come on. It's time for the wolves to come home. She walked toward the door, toward the army waiting outside, toward the moment that would either restore her family's name or end in a war that would burn through New York's underworld. Behind her, Antonio and Ricardo followed, weapons ready, honor demands met. The Pekán's daughter had returned, and the city would never be the same. The courtyard of the Ferrante estate had become a demilitarized zone. Antonio's men lined one side, weapons visible but not raised. The Bratva formed the opposite line, 20 soldiers deep, their faces carved from the same Slavic stone that had survived centuries of Russian winters. Maxim Petrov stood at the center, a bear of a man whose white beard couldn't hide the killer beneath. He'd been Dmitri's second in command, the one who'd held the Bratva together after the massacre while searching for any surviving Volkovs. His search had just ended. Please smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Drop your comments so we will bring more exciting stories to you. Victoria walked forward alone, her waitress uniform torn and bloodstained, the silver Orthodox cross visible around her neck. She stopped 10 feet from Maxim and spoke in Russian, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard. Uncle Maxim, it's been a long time. The old man's face cracked. For a moment, the hardened Pakhan disappeared, replaced by a man seeing a ghost of someone he'd loved like a daughter. Vikachka? Little Vika? We searched for you. For years we searched. I know. I hid. I survived. She gestured to the Ferrante estate behind her. And I found the truth. Maxim's expression hardened, his eyes shifting to Antonio. You stand with the men who killed your father? I stand with the truth. Victoria pulled out a tablet, holding it up so both sides could see. Antonio Ferrante gave the order, but he was manipulated by his consigliere, Franco Torino. Franco orchestrated the massacre to steal Papa's empire. He's been running those routes for 8 years, selling intelligence to rival families, playing both sides. She pressed play. Franco's confession filled the courtyard. Every word, every admission, every detail of his 30-year betrayal. When it finished, Maxim's face was murderous. Where is this Franco? In the basement. Alive. Waiting for your judgment. And Ferrante? Maxim's hand moved toward his weapon. He still gave the order, Vika. Blood debt demands. Blood debt has been acknowledged. Antonio stepped forward, his voice carrying authority despite facing an army. He switched to heavily accented Russian. I was weapon. Franco was shooter. I carry guilt. But Dmitri's daughter showed honor, saved my life when she could let me die. She earned truth. She earned respect. She earned her father's empire back. Maxim looked between them, calculating, weighing honor against vengeance. The 5 families will never accept a Volkov controlling Bratva operations in New York. It threatens the balance. Then we change the balance, Victoria said. She reached out, taking Antonio's hand with her left, extending her right to Maxim. Papa taught me that empires built on fear crumble, but alliances built on respect endure. The Volkovs and Ferrantes were played against each other. Franco wanted us weak, divided, easy to control. I say we show him, and everyone watching, what happens when wolves and lions hunt together. Ricardo stepped forward, his voice steady. The Ferrante family acknowledges the blood debt. We will return all Volkov routes and operations. We will provide security and political cover for Bratva movements in our territory. And we will stand witness as Victoria Volkova is recognized as her father's true heir. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. More than that, she stands under my personal protection, not as property, as an equal, as, he hesitated, then finished in English, as someone who's earned my respect, and maybe more. The courtyard went silent. Every soldier, Russian and Italian, recognized what was being offered. An alliance, a bridge between 2 worlds that had been at war since they'd arrived in America. Maxim studied Victoria's face, searching for any sign of coercion. Vikachka, Is this what you want? To work with the family that killed your father? I want what Papa wanted, power, yes, but power used with honor. Franco turned us into enemies. I'm turning us into allies. She squeezed Antonio's hand. The Ferrantes were weapons. I'm choosing to forgive the weapon and destroy the hand that wielded it. That's what Papa would have done. Maxim was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, took Victoria's hand, and pulled her into a crushing embrace. Your father would be so proud, little wolf. You've done what he never could, united the families without firing a shot. He released her, turned to Antonio, and extended his hand. The Bratva accepts your alliance, Ferrante. But Franco Torino, he belongs to us. Volkov blood demands Volkov justice. He's yours, Antonio agreed, shaking the offered hand. And when you're finished, we'll scatter what's left where every family can see it. A message about what happens to those who manipulate honor for profit. The two old killers nodded, an accord reached in blood and respect. Victoria looked at Ricardo, seeing him fully for the first time. Not the arrogant heir who'd mocked her accent, but the man who'd stepped forward to claim her as an equal. Something in his eyes made her breath catch. Something that felt dangerously like possibility. So, she said quietly in English, I'm under your protection now? If you'll have it, Ricardo replied. I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but I'd like the chance to earn your trust. To prove I'm more than the spoiled bastard who mocked you in that lounge. You have one chance, Victoria said. Waste it, and I'll feed you to the wolves myself. His smile was genuine, warm. I wouldn't expect anything less from Dmitry Volkov's daughter. As the sun rose higher over the estate, the two armies began to lower their weapons. Russian and Italian soldiers eyed each other warily, but no shots were fired. No blood spilled. Because in the center of it all stood a woman who'd spent 8 years invisible, who'd saved the life of her enemy, who'd exposed a traitor, and who'd united two families through the sheer force of honor and intelligence. The waitress was gone. Victoria Volkova, Pekan's daughter, had returned. And the underworld would never be the same. Inside the basement, Franco Torino heard boots on the stairs. Russian boots, moving with purpose, and finally understood that his empire of lies had crumbled. The wolves had come home, and they were hungry.